Okay, quick show of hands. How many of you have ever used a bar chart, a pie chart, or a graph, all right, to understand data? Wonderful. What if I told you that we're working on a project and maybe you'd be interested in helping us on actually converting data into objects? Objects that have size and shape and color, much like your bar chart might have something very tall representing a large quantity. Well, you could make a different shape that's big or small, and colors could mean something. You could even have textures mean something, right? Something's rough or something smooth would tell us something different about the data. We can even turn data into notes played by different instruments and then listen to how those notes change over time. I'm working with an incredible team doing this sort of work, trying to convert data into something more like our lived reality, something that the human brain's good at. You see, the human mind is naturally actually amazingly good at detecting patterns out in the world around us. So the intuition here is we're not as equally as good at understanding a spreadsheet. Think of the last speaker, Carla's talk. She was talking about all these sensors embedded in things, right? The Internet of Things. These are giving out vast data streams. And the question is, how do we understand all of this data, all this big data coming in? And our team believes that you have to use all of our senses to even begin to get around some of these projects or problems. So I think in the future, rather than taking a data set and first calculating the mean, the median, or the mode, or making a bar chart, I think we'll actually say, welcome to the data room. Let me take this data and throw it into a virtual reality space where all of a sudden I can interact with these objects and I can see new relationships and new patterns that I hadn't seen before. So I'm working with an incredible team of colleagues. We know science progresses in collaboration with others because there's just not enough time in the day for everybody to know everything, right? And so I'm actually a political scientist, and I wanted to use these tools to help understand war. So I'll be talking about that in a second. Data into notes. We can actually convert individual bits of and tell the data, every time event number 2 comes up, play a C sharp with a trumpet. And every time event number 3 comes up, play a D with an oboe or something. And then we can actually listen to the trends over time and see what we can learn. In the future, your job might include listening to a real-time data feed in a lab. Maybe you work in national security in the future and you're listening to cyber threat traffic. This can all be condensed down, and this could actually form a persistent audio landscape that represents your working world, something that you come to recognize when you go to work, right? Oh yeah, that sounds sort of familiar. It sort of lays down a track, a baseline pattern, like, oh yeah, I know that tune. That's like an average day at the office. Such that when something's strange, you'll hear it really quick, right? You'll be able to turn and say, wait, what's going on with this data? I'm not quite sure. Let me check and look into it. So we're going to perceptualize the data set that I collected on the Angolan War. I'm really interested in understanding war dynamics. And this started when I was a Peace Corps volunteer living in Southern Africa in the late 1990s. I was actually very embarrassed and ashamed when I started talking to people on the ground because I realized I didn't know about a horrific war taking place in Angola just a few miles from my house. So it became really important to me to collect stories from school teachers and students and truck drivers, everybody along the border that I could find. And I ended up creating an event data set of the battles and massacres that took place in the Angolan War. Actually, it was a historiography of the entire 40-year-long war, a story told from beginning to end. So I was really excited to visualize it, and then a little bit depressed because I didn't really have the right tools yet. Because you see this two-dimensional flat map that I started out creating doesn't really tell the story. It doesn't sort of recover the stories that I'd learned from 2 years of coding, right? I put a lot of work into it, and I became somewhat knowledgeable about what happened in the war, but it always disturbed me when someone said, hey, tell me the story of Angolan War. I preferred a blank chalkboard to this. I felt like the data should be able to talk, or we should be able to see how one event links to the next. Working with a team at Singlifics, my friend Dave Warner created for me this comprehensive view, and for the first time I could actually see the Angolan War data that I'd collected. I was so excited. I could see errors and missing data. I could see new patterns, iterations back and forth between different combatants competing in terms of the massacres that they were committing, all kinds of interesting things. It's a three-dimensional space in which time is on the z-axis going up. And then I worked with Robert Alexander to sonify the Angolan War data, some 10,000 events over time. So I said, okay, every time there's a battle, let's play this note. We're gonna listen to some of this. Every time you hear, these are that many battles, massacres taking place in the war. So give it the due respect it deserves, because it represents real human casualties and atrocities and the very real loss of life. One thing that I want you to pay attention to is a loud clap sound. This is the day that the election results in 1992 came out. There was hope was high in Angola at this time that maybe we would get out of this mess through an election. Both the combatants agreed, let's lay down our weapons and see if we can't solve this peacefully. And while we know that this is a hopeful time in society, we also know that elections are really dangerous, potentially very dangerous in deeply divided societies, right? When the rules are crafted like the winner gets to take everything and the losers go home with nothing, that's a really dangerous time. So we'll listen and see, and I want to notice what patterns you hear. That's the day the election results came out, that big bang. The losers went on a rampage, not wanting to believe they really lost, and it actually ushered in the worst period of the war, some 2 years long of absolute nightmare for the Angolan people. Every time you hear that angelic sound or those chimes, that's ceasefire negotiations, peace talks going on, which makes you wonder, were these being negotiated in good faith? Or were they simply a ruse to gain better tactical advantage and positioning on the battlefield? I'm a professor at John Carroll University, and I talk to students a lot who really want to work in the area of peace building and conflict resolution. And I believe the best way to do that is to really understand conflicts, why they happen, wars, why they happen, very carefully by reading as much as you can, taking classes, looking at the theories, and then gathering all the data and evidence and using a large variety of techniques to understand the data. Collecting stories is also very, very important, and perhaps the most important. Sonification isn't a magic bullet cure-all solution. But in a toolkit that's quite large, if it's used in combination with other methodologies, might help lead us to some new discoveries. Thanks.
Absolutely amazing. All right, can I ask you a question?
Sure. Nice to meet you.
So what will perceptualization look like in 20 years?
Well, I think of the very last two talks right before me, and I think of sort of a mashup of all of those things, where you have a virtual reality space that I imagine, I don't know, I'm just guessing, no one knows what it'll be like in 20 years, but I imagine we'll have a data layer floating over our heads. We will no longer have, it'll look so old-fashioned and cute, all these cell phones we carry with us. I think our computers will be embedded in our objects, and then they'll be somehow in our eyes. So if I see somebody and I almost forget their name, I'll see hovering, oh, his name's Reese, and you met him in TED in 2015. You'll have that magic data layer floating, and then I think when you get data that you want to analyze, you'll go into these data rooms and you'll do analysis. And then hopefully also you can actually use it for predictive analytics in the future. You know how you come to almost anticipate where a song is going? Like if you hear a jazz song playing, you think, yeah, I kind of feel the general groove, no matter how many riffs and variations. Maybe you can't exactly predict the next note, but you can kind of feel a trajectory too with these sonifications. It almost gets to the point where you could say, all right, let's place a bet and see if I press pause, could I guess the next note? And I think maybe in 20 years, they'll be kind of figuring out the groove of sonification and perceptualization. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.